Before we get into the video, could everyone please subscribe to my Endless Diary Tales channel? Thank you so much. On our wedding night, my promising military officer husband locked me, his legally wedded wife, outside the door, all because of his sweet, delicate adopted sister. In the entire military compound, I became the biggest joke. Eventually, I slipped into an icy lake and froze to death. When I opened my eyes again, I was back to the second day of our wedding in 1978. This time, when Chloe, playing the same fragile, gentle act, brought a bowl of chicken soup to nourish Jacob and stood before me with that dainty little look, clearly trying to replay her old trick of stealing what's not hers, I smiled. Before she could speak, I snatched the steaming soup from her hands and, in full view of the entire courtyard, poured it right onto her pitiful face. Her shriek cut through the peaceful morning air and marked the beginning of my second life as Emily Carter. "What are you doing, Emily?" she cried out. Chloe clutched her scalded, reddened face, tears streaming down like a broken strand of pearls. "I was just being kind, bringing soup for you and Jacob. How could you?" Her words were perfectly timed, putting herself in the role of the victim, while quietly making me out to be unreasonable and ungrateful in front of the entire military compound. She gave me a full dose of public humiliation. In my last life, I was deceived by this very performance. I thought she sincerely cared for me. I treated her like a real sister and poured my heart into our relationship. But in truth, while enjoying all my kindness, she was entangled with my husband, Jacob Carter, in a shady and ambiguous relationship. She made me look like a vulgar, crude woman, undeserving of a hero like him. In the end, she even had a hand in my accident, my fall into the freezing lake that cost me everything. I looked at her, my heart cold as ice. A circle of military wives had already gathered, pointing fingers and whispering, "Look at that. That's the woman Captain Carter brought back from New York. A capitalist's daughter. No wonder she acts so high and mighty." Exactly. Chloe's known throughout the compound as such a kind, gentle girl. She brings soup with good intentions, and Emily just goes off and throws it on her. Captain Carter's really unlucky. Their words were no different from what I had heard in my past life, but I ignored the idle gossip. I looked down at Chloe and slowly began to speak. My voice wasn't loud, but it was enough for everyone to hear clearly. "Comrade Chloe, from now on, please call me Mrs. Carter or Comrade Carter. The word sister-in-law sounds filthy coming from a woman who clings to my husband." Chloe's face turned ghostly pale, worse than when she was burned. She hadn't expected that I, the woman she once had under her thumb, would suddenly speak so sharply and confidently. You're talking nonsense. When have I ever clung to Jacob?" she protested anxiously, tears pouring down even harder, as if she'd suffered the greatest injustice. I gave a soft laugh, stepped closer, and whispered just loud enough for only the two of us to hear. "Who are you pretending for? You know exactly why Jacob didn't come to the bridal room last night, don't you? You really think I'm still that same fool you could mold however you wanted?" Chloe's body stiffened, her pupils contracting sharply. My husband, Jacob Carter, was the youngest regimental commander in the entire army. He had a bright future and came from a powerful military family. Meanwhile, I, Emily Carter, was the daughter of a disgraced capitalist household carrying a bad class label. Our marriage was an unexpected arrangement. In my past life, I was insecure and hypersensitive. Chloe's manipulations easily drove a wedge between me and Jacob. I quarreled with him constantly, eventually alienating everyone and losing everything. But this time, the rules were going to change. I didn't even spare Chloe another glance. Instead, I turned to the gathered military wives, raised my voice just slightly, and addressed them with calm resolve. "Ladies, I know many of you are curious, or perhaps a little prejudiced about me, the newcomer. It's true that my father's background isn't ideal, but that doesn't mean I won't take my marriage seriously. Since I married a soldier, I am a soldier's wife. I will prove with my actions that I am worthy of Jacob Carter, and of the honor that comes with this uniform." When I finished, I bowed deeply, not to plead or argue, but to show a calm, steady dignity, and a promise that echoed loud and clear. The murmurs around us gradually quieted. The military wives, who had previously looked at me with judgmental eyes, now wore expressions of contemplation. Just then a tall, strong figure stepped out from the morning training formation. He wore a sleeveless olive-green military tank top that outlined his lean, muscular build. A thin layer of sweat clung to his sun-bronzed skin. His brow was furrowed, his eyes sharp as a hawk. It was my husband, Jacob Carter. His gaze swept over Chloe, who looked utterly humiliated, then landed on me, and finally stopped at the broken bowl and spilled soup on the ground. My sudden shift today had clearly caught him off guard. The room fell into a long, heavy silence. Finally, he didn't insist on leaving. Instead, he placed the burn ointment on the table and turned toward the washroom. The sound of running water echoed from behind the door. I knew then I had won the first round. I walked into the kitchen. The rice bin was full, and next to it hung a fresh slab of pork. It was obvious Jacob had stocked up ahead of time. In my last life, I took all of this for granted. I even complained that he wasn't romantic. Rolling up my sleeves, I began rinsing rice and preparing the meal. Though I'd never lifted a finger to cook back then, after death, my soul had lingered around Jacob for 10 years. I had watched him clumsily learn how to cook, how to take care of himself. I had memorized every step. A simple meal, 2 dishes, and a soup was soon set on the table. Jacob came out from washing up. When he saw the food, a flicker of surprise crossed his face. "You made this?" he asked. "Try it. See if it suits your taste." I handed him a bowl of rice. He picked up his chopsticks and took a bite of the greens. He chewed slowly, silently. Then, without saying a word, he continued eating. We finished the meal in silence. He ate quickly, but not a grain of rice or bit of food was left in his bowl. "I have a meeting with the logistics unit this afternoon. I might be home late," he said as he put down his bowl and stood up to leave. "Wait a second," I called after him. I walked into the bedroom and brought out a pair of cloth shoes I had rushed to finish overnight. I'd used the best fabric I had brought from home. The stitching was tight and fine, and the soles were thick and durable. In my last life, I never got the chance to give him these shoes. Not even before I died. "Your military boots are too hard. Wearing them for too long is bad for your feet. Try these," I said, holding them out to him. Jacob's gaze dropped to the shoes. He didn't move for a long time. I knew exactly what he was thinking. To everyone else, I was a spoiled daughter of a wealthy family. How could I possibly know how to sew? "My mom taught me," I said softly. She said, "If you want to win a man's heart, you have to." I didn't even finish my sentence before realizing how bold it sounded for this era. My cheeks instantly flushed with heat, but Jacob acted like he hadn't heard the latter part of what I said. He quietly took the cloth shoes from my hands, removed his military boots, and slipped the new pair on. They fit perfectly. He stood up, walked a few steps, then looked at me, his eyes filled with an emotion I couldn't quite read. "They fit well," he said in a low voice. "Thank you." It was the first time he had ever said thank you to me. After Jacob left, I started tidying up the house. I had just finished sweeping the floor when there was a knock at the door. I thought maybe it was one of the military wives coming by to chat. But when I opened it, I found a young officer I didn't recognize. His name was Harrison Chun, Jacob's orderly. He had thick brows, sharp eyes, and an air of uprightness. When he saw me, his face flushed slightly, and he looked a bit nervous. It was my first time meeting him. I noticed a small engraving of a sailboat on his canteen, likely a keepsake that meant something important to him. "Mrs. Carter," he said quickly, clearly aware of what had happened earlier that morning. He corrected himself immediately with practiced respect. "The captain asked me to deliver this to you." He handed me a craft paper envelope. I opened it and found food ration coupons, fabric vouchers, meat tickets, and a thick stack of crisp, brand-new bills. 200 yuan in total. The captain said, "From now on, all the household money and ration tickets are to be managed by you," Harrison relayed. After saluting me, he turned and ran off. Holding that thick stack of money and vouchers, I was overwhelmed by emotion. 200 yuan was a small fortune in this era. Jacob's monthly allowance was only 70 or 80 yuan at best. He had just handed over all his savings and resources to me. That kind of trust weighed heavily on my chest. As I stood there deep in thought, Aunt John from next door poked her head in. She was warm-hearted and known around the compound for always being in the know. Emily, busy are you? She asked cheerfully. Hello, Aunt Jang, I replied politely. You really married well, sweetie, she said, stepping closer and lowering her voice to a conspiratorial whisper. You wouldn't believe what your Jacob did this morning. We were all stunned. He even stood up to the mayor's sister-in-law and made her write a self-reflection. My heart stirred. The mayor's sister-in-law. That's Chloe, of course. Aunt Jen slapped her thigh dramatically. Her brother-in-law is our division's chief of staff. She usually walks around like she owns the place, always looking down on everyone. No one dares mess with her except her husband. Captain Carter isn't afraid of anyone. So that was it. Chloe's backing was the division's chief of staff. No wonder she could run wild in the compound in my past life, trampling me underfoot. This game was more complicated than I had realized. As I processed everything, Aunt Jang leaned in even closer, her voice turning secretive. Emily, now don't mind me saying this, but you'd better keep a close eye on your husband. That Chloe's been trailing after him since they were kids. Don't let her innocent act fool you. She's rotten underneath. Thank you for the reminder, Aunt Jang, I said sincerely, giving her a grateful smile. Turns out the people around me had seen things clearly all along. I was just too blinded in my past life to listen to any of them. After seeing Aunt Jang off, I closed the door and looked at the money and ration tickets in my hands. A bold plan began to take shape in my mind. Jacob had given me his trust. I couldn't let him down. I wasn't just going to be a good wife. I was going to be his strongest support. As for Chloe and her chief of staff brother-in-law, we'd see who would outplay whom. That afternoon, I didn't idle around. I cleaned every corner of the house and carefully stored away the few stylish fabrics I had brought with me from Shanghai. I took the money and ration coupons and headed straight to the supply cooperative in town. It was still 1978, and supplies were relatively scarce. But with the right tickets and connections, you could still get your hands on some decent goods. I didn't spend recklessly. Instead, I planned everything carefully, purchasing basic seasonings, a few pounds of coarse grains, and breaking from the usual, a stewing hen, and some traditional Chinese medicinal herbs. On the way back, the entire compound was in an uproar. Did you see that? Captain Carter's new wife bought another chicken. She really is a capitalist's daughter throwing money around like it grows on trees. There's no way she can keep that up. I don't know what Captain Carter was thinking. These spoiled women will bleed a man dry eventually. I listened to the gossip without changing my expression. When I got home, I didn't pay attention to anyone's judgmental looks. I shut the door and got to work handling the hen. In my past life, I spent 10 years drifting by Jacob's side as a ghost. He suffered from severe stomach problems due to years of irregular meals, and later even developed hepatitis. Those health issues became the biggest obstacle to his promotion during a major military exercise. I wasn't going to let that tragedy repeat itself in this life. I prepared the chicken, added Chinese medicinal herbs like angelica root and astragalus, and simmered it slowly over low heat. Soon, a rich, savory aroma drifted from our windows, spreading throughout the entire courtyard. The scent boldly invaded every household's nose, making more than a few children drool with hunger. Even the military wives, who had just been criticizing me for being wasteful, couldn't help but lean out of their windows, sniffing the air eagerly. Oh my God, what is that smell? It's amazing. Smells like it's coming from Captain Carter's place. What on earth is she cooking in there? That evening, Jacob came home. The moment he stepped through the door, the mouth-watering aroma hit him. He spotted the golden, glistening pot of chicken soup on the table. And for once, the always composed man actually froze in place. It's for you, I said, placing a large bowl of soup in front of him. A poached egg floated gently in the broth. Try it. I've been stewing it all afternoon. He looked at me, eyes unreadable. Then he picked up the spoon and took a sip. The rich savory flavor enveloped his tongue instantly. The warmth traveled from his throat down to his stomach, washing away the exhaustion of the entire day. He didn't say a word, just kept eating silently, finishing bowl after bowl until the entire pot was emptied. After dinner, as always, he headed toward the study to work. Jacob, I called out to him. Can you not work tonight? He turned to look at me. I pointed toward the basin of warm water, I had already prepared. Soak your feet and relax a little. It's good for your health. The work will never end, but your body is the real foundation of the revolution. He stared at me silently for a few seconds. Then, without saying a word, he took off his shoes and put his feet into the hot water. As the warmth enveloped his ankles, I could see his usually tense posture slowly begin to relax. I brought over a small stool, sat beside him, and relying on what I remembered from those 10 years, started massaging the acupoints on his head like I'd seen doctors do. My touch was gentle and light. "You know how to do this too?" he asked, eyes closed, voice low and a little hoarse. "My mom was often ill," I said casually, making up an excuse. "I studied a bit with an old traditional doctor." He didn't press further. The room fell quiet again, broken only by the soft chirping of insects outside the window. I could feel the tension in him slowly dissolving. This man carried too much on his shoulders. He was exhausted physically and mentally. Just when I thought he was about to fall asleep, he suddenly spoke. "This afternoon, Chief Jao came to see me." My heart tensed. Chief Zhou Hiang was Chloe's brother-in-law. "He came because of Chloe?" I asked. Jacob's tone was calm. "He told me to give you a heads up, told me not to escalate the situation." "What did you say?" I paused what I was doing and looked at him nervously. Jacob slowly opened his eyes under the soft light. His gaze was piercing and resolute. "They're my soldiers. This is my home. You're my wife. Protecting you is the most natural thing in the world." My eyes welled up instantly. My wife protecting you. In my past life, I waited until death to hear those words, and they never came. He went on, his voice low. "Zhao Hiang also said, your background isn't clean." He warned me to be cautious to avoid letting a woman ruin my future. That was his real goal. Using my family background to pressure Jacob, to make him reconsider me. "And what did you say?" My voice trembled slightly. Without a word, Jacob suddenly reached out and pulled me into his arms. His embrace was solid and warm, carrying the faint scent of soap mixed with the cool sharpness unique to military men. I told him, he whispered near my ear, enunciating each word carefully. "My future is my family, my wife. If I can't protect my own home, what kind of man am I? How could I ever lead soldiers into battle?" His breath was warm against my ear, making my whole body shiver. I couldn't hold back anymore. I buried my face in his chest, and tears silently fell. This man, he knew everything. He understood Hiang's veiled threats. He sensed my fear. So he chose the most direct way to give me a sense of security. It wasn't that he didn't know how to be romantic. He simply turned all his love into action. "Emily," he said in his clumsy way as he patted my back. "Don't be afraid. I'm here." I nodded firmly against his chest. "With you I'm not afraid of anything." "Chloe Johong, you've miscalculated. The man standing by my side is someone who'd take on the world for me." The next day, I became the center of attention in the compound. The news of Jacob standing up for me, and even going against the division's chief of staff for my sake, spread like wildfire overnight. The looks the other military wives gave me had completely changed. From initial disdain to curiosity, and now nothing but envy and jealousy. Even Aunt Zhang from next door looked at me with newfound respect. "Emily, you're something else," she said, shaking her head with admiration. "You've got Captain Carter wrapped around your little finger." I simply smiled and said nothing. I knew it wasn't about control. It was that Jacob and I were finally starting to build this home together. Side by side, with the same heart and purpose. Chloe, after being punished with the written reflection, hadn't dared show up for several days. The compound fell into a temporary calm. But I knew this was just the calm before the storm. Zoho Hiang wouldn't let this go easily. I had to grow stronger. Strong enough to stand up to them on my own. I couldn't rely on Jacob's protection forever. I had to become someone with my own value. The opportunity came sooner than I expected. The military district was organizing a joint military-civilian talent show to promote unity. Every regiment had to send performers. This threw Jacob's men into a total panic. They were great at fighting battles, but the idea of singing and dancing on stage was like asking them to surrender. Even old Wang, one of Jacob's most seasoned officers, looked like he was on the verge of pulling his hair out. He found Jacob and let out a long sigh. Jacob, what are we going to do? They sing off-key, dance like they're punching air. What are we going to do? Have them go up there and perform a set of military drills? We'd be the laughingstock of the entire base. Jacob looked equally helpless. I stood nearby, listening, and a thought began forming in my mind. Maybe I could give it a try, I offered. Both men turned to look at me in unison. You. Old Wang looked skeptical. Emily, this isn't a joke. Our unit's honor is on the line. I didn't blame him for doubting me. With my reputation as a pampered capitalist, it was no wonder he questioned me. Jacob also looked at me, saying nothing, but there was curiosity in his eyes. I studied dance and singing when I was a child, I said calmly. And I have an idea. In my past life, I once obsessed over a celebrity and even took lessons in modern dance and pop vocals just to get closer to him. Even though it might have seemed a bit outrageous for this era, with some thoughtful adjustments, I knew it would be something truly eye-catching. What idea? Jacob asked. Our performance doesn't have to be limited to just singing and dancing, I replied. We can create a skit, a short play. A skit? Old Wang looked even more puzzled. Yes, I explained. We'll act out scenes from the real lives of soldiers and military wives. We can show soldiers training hard in the field, wives quietly supporting them behind the scenes. We can blend in songs, dances, even spoken word poetry. With real stories, we'll move people's hearts. My words made both Jacob and Old Wang fall into deep thought. There's something to that, Old Wang suddenly said, slapping his thigh. Real, grounded, better than all that over-the-top singing and dancing nonsense. Jacob nodded slightly too, and I saw a flicker of approval in his eyes. All right, he said firmly. You'll be in charge of this. If you need people or materials, just talk to Old Wang. I was stunned. Yes, you. Jacob's tone left no room for argument. I believe in you. My chest warmed. It was the first time he had ever shown me such trust in something work-related. All right, I nodded firmly. I promise I'll get it done. From that day on, I was completely swept up in the project. I started by writing the script, then casting the roles, and finally leading rehearsals. I chose the most ordinary soldiers and military wives in the regiment. None of them had any acting experience. In the beginning, everyone was stiff and self-conscious. Their movements were awkward, their expressions nervous. Sis, I don't think I can do it, said a young soldier named Stone, his face flushed bright red. I get on stage and start shaking. Yeah, Emily, some of the military wives added, shaking their heads. We're not actors. I didn't get angry. I wasn't discouraged either. Instead, I walked them through the script little by little. I told the story of an old squad leader who lost a leg to save a comrade. I told the story of a military wife who lived like a widow for years, but still supported her husband's work without complaint. I told the story of a newlywed wife who waited at the train station an entire day and night, because her husband had to leave suddenly for a mission on their first home visit. These weren't made-up stories. They came from the very people standing in that courtyard. As I spoke, my eyes welled with tears. As they listened, so did theirs. Sis, don't go on, said Stone, the once tough soldier now wiping at his eyes. That new recruit in your story, that's me. I'll play the military wife waiting for her husband, said another young woman. Because that's exactly who I am. One by one they stepped forward. Their emotions were stirred, and rehearsal slowly found its rhythm. I carefully wove elements of modern dance into the soldiers' training movements, transforming basic drills and combat sequences into something powerful and artistic. I also taught the military wives a military-themed ballad that would become wildly popular in later years. Its melody was beautiful, its lyrics sincere. The rehearsal hall buzzed with energy and purpose. Jacob came by a few times. He always stood in the corner quietly watching me direct the whole scene with confidence. His eyes held nothing but pride. Naturally, word of all this made its way to Chloe and Zhou Hiang. That day, as I was in the middle of rehearsal, Chloe suddenly appeared. She was dressed in a brand new dress. Her makeup was flawless, and she held a fruit basket in her hand. Everyone's been working hard, she said cheerfully. I'm here on behalf of my brother-in-law, Chief Zhao, to show our appreciation. She smiled like nothing had ever happened, as if the humiliations of the past had been erased. But I caught the disdain in her eyes as she glanced at me, like she didn't believe a pampered girl like me, who probably couldn't even tell rice from wheat, could pull off something of real value. One of the military wives, Leon, who had a forthright personality and was playing the female lead in our skit, walked up excitedly when she saw Chloe. The two of them had gotten along well in the past. "Chloe, you're finally here. Come check out the program. We're rehearsing one of Emily's scripts." "It looks pretty," Chloe said with a smile, though a flash of disdain flickered in her eyes. She stepped right into the center of the practice area, just as we were rehearsing a scene where the military wives were sewing and mending uniforms for the soldiers. "What's this supposed to be?" she asked, feigning surprise. "Looks more like some sort of spirit-calling ritual." She covered her mouth and laughed dramatically, as if she didn't just insult everything we were doing. The atmosphere froze. Everyone's expression changed instantly. Leon's face went pale, then flushed red. Her husband had just died in action not long ago. This dance meant the world to her. Chloe's words were like salt poured directly into her open wound. My face darkened, and I was about to speak, but Leon beat me to it. With a loud smack, she threw the basket of thread and fabric onto the ground. She pointed straight at Chloe's nose and snapped, "Watch your mouth, Chloe. What do you mean spirit calling? We're mending uniforms for our husbands. We're supporting them as they protect this country. What the hell do you know? You're just some doll who only knows how to put on makeup and throw your brother-in-law's name around like it means something. Who gave you the right to look down on us?" Leon's outburst was like a spark tossed into dry grass. The rest of the military wives glared at Chloe with righteous fury. Chloe was clearly rattled. Her face went pale, and she instinctively stepped back. "I didn't mean it like that." "Yes, you did," Leon shot back relentlessly. "You've always looked down on us. You looked down on our husbands who shed blood and sweat. I was blind to ever think of you as a friend. From today on, if you dare show your face here again during rehearsals, I'll beat you every time I see you." Leon had always been quiet and reserved since the army assigned her a light-duty librarian job after her husband's death. But today, she was like an enraged lioness. On her wrist was a well-worn string of beads, her husband's keepsake. Chloe was panicked now. She hadn't expected her careless words to stir up such a hornet's nest. She looked at me for help, eyes pleading, but I simply stared at her coldly, saying nothing. Just as the tension reached its peak, Jacob and political officer Wang arrived. The moment Jacob saw the scene in front of him, his brows furrowed deeply. "What's going on here?" he asked sternly. Chloe, spotting what she thought was her savior, rushed over in tears. "Jacob, I was just here to deliver some fruit." But Leon, she didn't get to finish. Leon stepped forward, cutting her off immediately and recounting the entire situation in detail. By the time she finished, Jacob's expression had turned ice cold. He looked at Chloe, disappointment and disgust written all over his face. "Chloe, it seems your last written reflection meant nothing to you," he said flatly. "Starting today, all of your military family benefits are revoked. You're to move out of the compound." This punishment hit her harder than any slap. Being forced to move out meant she'd lose all proximity and access to Jacob for good. "No, Jacob, you can't do this to me. My brother-in-law is Zoha Haifong," she screamed. "He's welcome to come talk to me," Jacob said without emotion. "Or you can choose to go explain your words to the military tribunal. See if they think what you said earlier qualifies as undermining military morale." The weight of those 4 words, undermining military morale, crushed Chloe like a mountain. She collapsed to the ground, her face ashen. I knew then Chloe was finished. And through this incident, I'd finally earned more than envy from the other military wives. I had gained their trust and respect. The day of the performance finally arrived. Our unit's program was scheduled right in the middle of the show lineup. Everyone was visibly nervous backstage, palms sweating. I took a deep breath, walked in front of them and smiled. "Don't be scared," I said. "Just forget there's even an audience out there. Forget it's a competition," I said with a smile. "Just imagine we're back at our own training ground in our own home. All you need to do is bring out your truest selves, your most sincere emotions, and that's more than enough." My words calmed everyone down like a soothing balm. Slowly, their tension began to ease. The curtain lifted. The lights came on. The stage was set to resemble a training field. A group of young soldiers marched forward, shouting bold slogans, performing synchronized military drills. Their movements had hints of the dance elements I had taught them, hard yet fluid, full of power and grace. The audience was captivated immediately. Then the scene shifted. A warm light illuminated the other side of the stage where a group of military wives sat on small stools quietly sewing uniforms. Their dance was gentle but filled with strength. Every gesture held deep love and longing for their husbands. Leon sat in the center. As she sewed, she softly hummed the ballad I had taught her. I walk you past the little village gate. There's something I must say, though the flowers bloom by the roadside. Don't go picking them on your way. The melody was simple, and the lyrics carried a hint of playful warning, but it stirred laughter from the audience with its sweet sincerity. The story continued to unfold. The joy of new recruits joining the army. The loneliness of standing watch at distant borders. The solemn courage of injuries in battle. The priceless warmth of receiving a letter from home. Each scene was drawn from their real lives. Nothing extravagant, no fancy effects, just pure emotion, real and raw. When the actors reached the part where soldiers crawled through mud, covered in dirt, and the wives quietly cried while reading letters from their husbands confirming they were safe, the audience was already filled with sniffles and tears. Even the leaders from the division, seated in the judges' row, were visibly moved, eyes red, heads nodding with deep emotion. At the very end, all the actors, soldiers and wives alike, stood side by side on stage, hand in hand. The background music swelled. It was the rousing chorus of "Unity is strength. Unity is strength. This strength is iron. This strength is steel. Stronger than iron, stronger than steel." Their voices echoed throughout the auditorium, shaking every heart present. When the curtain fell, there was a moment of silence. Then thunderous applause, long and unending, erupted like a wave. I knew we had done it. Backstage, everyone hugged each other, laughing and crying at once. Political Officer Wang's face was red with excitement. He couldn't stop patting me on the shoulder. "Emily, you're even better than the men. You're the pride of our whole regiment." Jacob didn't say a word. He simply walked up and, right in front of everyone, wrapped me in a tight embrace. "You make me proud," he whispered into my ear. In the end, our performance won first prize without suspense. The division commander himself presented the award to our unit. As he shook Jacob's hand, his tone was full of emotion. "Jacob, your unit has taught us all a lesson today. This is what military art should be. Real, heartfelt, and powerful." Then he turned to me, eyes filled with admiration. "You must be Comrade Emily Carter. Well done. You're no ordinary military wife." Flushed with surprise, I quickly saluted. "To serve the people." The commander burst into hearty laughter. That night's performance officially etched my name, Emily Carter, into the records of the division. I was no longer just the troublesome capitalist daughter. I had become Jacob Carter's capable partner, a military wife of the new era. Thoughtful, talented, and strong. But the happiest of all were the soldiers and wives from our regiment. We hadn't just won a trophy, we had earned true respect. At the celebration banquet, they lifted me high into the air. I looked down at all the smiling, genuine faces below and at Jacob, standing just outside the crowd, his eyes focused entirely on me. My heart overflowed with a fulfillment and happiness I had never known before. Still, I didn't let victory go to my head. While everyone else celebrated, I noticed a figure lurking in the dim corner of the auditorium. Zhou Hiang, staring straight at me with a cold, calculating gaze. I knew he and Chloe wouldn't back down that easily. The real challenge was only beginning. But the success of the performance made life in the compound significantly easier. The military wives stopped excluding me. In fact, they started coming to me for advice about everything from household matters to parenting. I had unknowingly become their go-to person, their backbone. I didn't waste the momentum. Riding the wave of goodwill, I pitched an even bolder idea to Jacob and Political Officer Wang. Forming a military wives mutual support group. "A mutual support group?" Officer Wang asked, puzzled. "Yes," I explained. Many of the wives here in the compound have their own unique skills. Aunt Jang makes incredible pickled vegetables. Mrs. Lee is gifted with needlework like a professional embroiderer. And Sister Wang used to be a well-known barefoot doctor back in her hometown. These are all valuable resources. My idea is to organize everyone. Those with skills can teach. Those without can learn. We can grow together. We could even make products. Pickles, preserved vegetables, handmade cloth shoes, local snacks, and sell them in town. It would bring an extra income and improve everyone's quality of life. At the time, this suggestion was nothing short of revolutionary. Starting a civilian business within a military compound. It sounded dangerously close to capitalism. Officer Wang's brow furrowed immediately. Emily, I'm not sure this aligns with regulations. If someone accuses us of promoting capitalist ventures, it could get serious. I understood his concerns. I turned to Jacob. He had been listening in silence the whole time, but now he finally spoke. My father wrote me, he said casually, adding at the end that he mentioned the third plenary session of the 11th Central Committee just wrapped up. The nation's new direction is to focus on economic development. He looked at Officer Wang and me, then continued. He told us grassroots coders to free our minds, take bolder steps and move faster. Jacob looked at me, his gaze filled with encouragement. It's a great idea. Military wives live hard lives. If this improves their living conditions without interfering with military discipline, then it's one of the best ways to support our men on the front lines. I support you. His words were firm and decisive. With Jacob's backing, Officer Wang's doubts eased considerably. Well, then maybe we can try it on a small scale first, he asked, testing the waters. We go for it, Jacob said, sealing the deal. And just like that, the Military Wives Mutual Support Group was born. Quietly but officially, I gathered the wives and shared my idea. At first, only a few responded. Most were hesitant, worried about taking risks or attracting unwanted attention. I didn't push. Instead, I got started with a few willing ones, Aunt Jang and Mrs. Lee included. Aunt Jang's pickled vegetables were crisp and tangy, while Mrs. Lee's cloth shoes were sturdy and comfortable. Using the design sensibility I had brought from the future, I helped them improve their packaging. I added custom embroidered patterns to the shoes and designed simple, but appealing labels. Then I asked a young soldier named Xiao Yang, who was going home for the weekend, to bring our first batch of goods to a department store in the city to test sell. Xiao was clever and quick-witted, and his father just so happened to be the head of procurement at that very department store. After hearing my plan, Xiao Yang pounded his chest and promised to get the job done. He had a nervous habit of tugging on his earlobe whenever he felt pressure, but he never backed down. 3 days later, Xiao returned, bringing news that stunned us all. All 20 jars of pickles and 50 pairs of cloth shoes had sold out in less than a day. And his father, the store's purchasing director, had personally approved a long-term partnership. They wanted to place monthly orders. 100 jars of pickles and 200 pairs of shoes. The news spread through the compound like an explosion. Those wives who had been watching from the sidelines could no longer sit still. Count me in, Emily, they said one after another. I can make pickled vegetables too. And me? My knitted sweaters are really beautiful. Emily, please let us join you. Overnight, it seemed like every military wife in the compound had gathered at my doorstep, all eager to join the mutual support group. They competed to speak first, each one more enthusiastic than the last. I stood there taking in the bustling scene, my heart swelling with a deep sense of accomplishment. But the brighter the flame, the bigger the shadow. As our side business thrived, it was only a matter of time before Zhou Hiang took notice. That day, Jacob was in the middle of a meeting at the regiment when a military jeep pulled up suddenly in front of our house. Zhou Hiang stepped out with 2 military police officers, a stern look on his face. Comrade Emily Carter, he called out loudly, making sure the entire courtyard could hear him. You've been reported for illegally organizing production within the military compound, engaging in speculative profiteering and making illicit gains. You are to come with us for investigation. The military wives nearby were frightened and scattered, quietly slipping back into their homes without a sound. I gave a cold laugh inwardly. So, it had come to this after all. But I didn't panic. I looked straight at him and said calmly, "Chief Joe, we are following the nation's call to boost the economy and improve the quality of life for military families. How exactly is that considered profiteering? You don't get to decide what is or isn't profiteering." Zhou Hiang sneered. "Take her." The two military police stepped forward, reaching for my arm, when a sharp voice rang out behind them. "Stop." Jacob had returned, accompanied by Political Officer Wang and a group of senior officers. He rushed over, placing himself between me and the guards like a towering wall no one could get past. His face was stone cold as he stared down Zhou. "Chief Zhou, you're trying to take my wife away. Have you asked me?" "Her husband, the regimental commander." Zhao's expression darkened. "I'm performing official duties. Don't interfere." Jacob gave a cold laugh. "Then show your evidence. What proof do you have that my wife engaged in illegal profiteering? Do you have written orders from the higher-ups? A directive from the division?" Zhou was momentarily speechless. He hadn't expected resistance, nor had he come prepared with any formal paperwork. "I received a report from the masses," he stammered. "The masses?" Jacob's gaze swept the courtyard. "Which one of the masses? Let them step forward." Silence. Then slowly, one by one, the military wives who had hidden just moments earlier began to step out of their houses. Without saying a word, they came and stood behind me. They didn't speak, but their presence was louder than any words. Zhou's face turned ashen, livid, and purple like bruised flesh. "Jacob Carter, are you really going to shield her? Are you going to defy the organization for a woman?" he bellowed, desperate now. Just then, Political Officer Wang stepped forward, holding a document. "Chief Zhou, perhaps you haven't been informed," Wang said clearly, his voice firm. "Regarding the establishment of the Military Wives Mutual Support Group in our regiment, and its self-sustaining economic activities. We submitted a report to the division, and just moments ago we received word the party committee has held a meeting and our model has officially been approved. They've decided to roll it out as a pilot program across the entire division." "What?" Zhou looked like he'd been struck by lightning. He froze completely, stunned. My heart surged with joy. I hadn't realized Jacob and Officer Wang had already anticipated everything and made preparations behind the scenes. No, that's impossible," Zhou muttered, his voice hollow. "There's nothing impossible about it," said a commanding voice from behind him. Everyone turned. It was the division commander himself. He strode forward, his expression stern as he faced Zhou Hiang. "Comrade Zhou," the commander said coldly, "you are the chief of staff of this division. And yet your thinking is outdated, your vision narrow, and you have abused your authority to suppress exemplary models of progress. You've severely undermined the unity and development of the military." The commander's voice was cold and resolute. Zhou Hiang was drenched in sweat. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from duty for reflection," the commander declared without emotion. "The division's disciplinary committee will launch an investigation into your conduct." Zhao's legs buckled beneath him. He collapsed to the ground. He knew it was over. This storm ended in a complete victory for us. Zhou Hiang's fall brought the greatest joy to Jacob's soldiers. Apparently, he had long been a tyrant, withholding essential supplies and blocking projects at the grassroots level. Now that he was finally being held accountable, it felt like justice had been served. As for me, I had truly become the pride of the military wives. With support from the division, our mutual support group was officially recognized. I was appointed as the team leader, and our small operation grew into an organized, well-planned enterprise, what we now proudly called the Military Wives Workshop. We took on sewing and mending contracts for the Army's logistics department. Our pickled vegetables and handmade cloth shoes became hot items at the city's department stores. The lives of the wives improved significantly. Every month, they earned dividends of several dozen yuan, a considerable income at the time. The confidence and joy on their faces were undeniable. The compound transformed into a place of harmony and support. Everyone helped one another. We were like family. My relationship with Jacob also deepened as we built this together. He was no longer just the man who silently supported me. He began expressing himself. When I was busy, he'd bring me a cup of hot tea. When I was tired, he'd clumsily massage my shoulders. And sometimes, when no one was looking, he'd sneak a kiss on my cheek, then blush even before I could react. This man, tough as steel, was learning to be gentle in his own way. One evening, after we finished a long day at the workshop, we walked home under the silvery moonlight. It bathed us in a soft, comforting glow. "Emily," he suddenly said, his voice low. "Thank you." I turned to look at him. "Thank me for what?" I asked with a smile. "For coming into my life, for everything you've done for this family," he replied, eyes filled with tenderness that melted into my heart. "Silly," I said, squeezing his hand. "We're husband and wife. That's what we do, right?" He didn't say anything, just held my hand a little tighter. But just when I thought this happiness would last forever, a sudden crisis shattered our peace. Trouble had erupted at the southern border. Our troops received urgent orders to head to the front line immediately. Jacob's regiment was designated the primary strike force. He was going to war. I was reviewing this month's earnings with the military wives when Officer Wong walked in, his face grave. "Emily, can I speak to you for a moment?" My heart skipped a beat. When I entered the office, Jacob was already suited up in his full military uniform. His gaze was sharp. Determined, he was giving final instructions to several company commanders. Upon seeing me, he waved for them to leave. Now it was just the two of us. "I have to go," he said quietly. Tears welled up in my eyes immediately. I had always known that this was his duty as a soldier. But now that the moment had come, it still tore at my heart like a blade. "When?" I asked, trying my best to keep my voice steady. "Now so soon?" I couldn't speak. My lips trembled as I bit down hard to keep them from quivering. He walked over and pulled me into his arms. "I'm sorry," he whispered. "We've only just gotten married." I shook my head and buried my face in his chest. "No, you're a hero, Jacob. I'm proud of you. Take care of yourself," he said gently. "And take care of everyone here. I'm leaving the household to you." I nodded firmly. "Wait for me," he said, cupping my face in his hands. He kissed my forehead with deep affection. Then he turned and walked away. Without hesitation, he walked away with long, determined strides, never once looking back. I stood at the window, watching the troops assemble urgently on the parade ground, watching my husband board the military truck heading toward the front line. Swallowed up by the night. The roar of the engine grew fainter and fainter, until it disappeared completely into the darkness. I could no longer hold back my tears. They streamed down uncontrollably. "Jacob, please come back safely. I'll be waiting for you." After Jacob left, the entire compound fell into a somber silence. With their husbands deployed to the front, the hearts of the military wives had followed them south to the border. As the leader of the military wives support group, I knew I couldn't collapse now. I had to hold everyone together, keep the rear stable so our men at the front could fight without worry. I forced myself to bury my sorrow and fear and poured all my energy into our work. I organized the wives to make winter coats, warm shoes, and dry rations overnight, packing everything for the logistics department to deliver to the front lines. "We can't fight on the battlefield," I told them, "but our hearts are with them. Let them wear the coats we made, eat the food we cooked, so even in the cold, they can feel a little warmth." The wives wiped their tears and responded with enthusiasm. Soon, the lights in our workshop were blazing through the night, and the hum of sewing machines never stopped. But logistics wasn't enough. We also needed to take care of each other's emotional well-being. One of the wives in our compound, Susan Ye, had a son in Jacob's regiment. Ever since the deployment, she'd barely eaten or slept. She spent her days crying and soon became seriously ill. I visited her every day. I talked with her, comforted her. "Susan, you have to take care of yourself," I told her. "If you collapse, how can your son focus on the fight knowing his mother isn't well?" I also arranged for one of the younger wives in our support group to look after her. Her name was Kelly. She had a cheerful personality and loved telling jokes. Her husband was a political instructor in the company, and before he left, he had asked her to help watch over everyone. Kelly had these adorable little dimples when she smiled, and somehow her laughter was contagious. With our joint efforts, Susan finally began to recover emotionally. The days passed in a blur of busy hands and anxious waiting. News from the front came sporadically, some good, some bad. tugging constantly at our hearts. Every day, the sound we longed to hear most was the ringing of the postman's bicycle bell. Each letter from the front became a precious lifeline. I received several letters from Jacob. They were always short, just a few rushed lines. All is well. Don't worry. Take care of yourself. The handwriting was messy. I could tell he had written them in a hurry. But I knew those simple words were bought with his life on the line. I pressed the letters against my chest as if I could feel the steady beat of his heart through the paper. One day, while I was organizing the factory's production schedule, an aide suddenly came to get me on Officer Wang's orders. There was an emergency. My heart sank. I rushed to the regimental office. The atmosphere in his office was unusually heavy. "Emily," he said, handing me a telegram. "There's been an incident at the front." My mind went blank. With trembling hands, I took the telegram and read it. The message was brief. During a surprise operation, our troops were ambushed by enemy forces. There were heavy casualties. Jacob's vanguard regiment had been surrounded, and contact with the rear had been lost. Their status was unknown. Boom. The world spun around me. My legs gave out. I couldn't stand. No, it can't be. I muttered to myself, tears falling uncontrollably. "Emily, calm down," Officer Wang said, steadying me. "There's no confirmed news yet. We can't fall apart before we know the truth." Yes, I couldn't fall apart. I was the one everyone looked to for strength. If I crumbled, the whole compound would follow. I dug my fingernails deep into my palms. The sharp pain pulled me back to some semblance of reason. "Officer Wang." I lifted my head, my eyes red and swollen. "What can we do?" His voice was heavy, weighed down with helplessness. "Right now, all we can do is wait. Waiting is the cruelest torture in the world." For the next few days, we completely lost contact with the front lines. Rumors spread like wildfire through the compound. Some said the entire vanguard unit had been wiped out. Others whispered that Commander Carter had died while covering his men's retreat. Panic and despair spread like a plague. Several military wives fainted on the spot. A suffocating gloom settled over the entire compound. I knew I had to do something. I gathered all the military wives on the parade ground. Standing on a tall platform, I looked out at the rows of grief-stricken, hollow faces staring back at me. "I know you're scared," I said, my voice rough with emotion. "You're hurting. I am too. My husband is out there just like yours. But will crying help? Will giving up help? No. Our men are heroes. They're warriors on the battlefield. They are the great wall that protects our home and country. They are not so easily defeated. We are their wives, their strongest support. While they bleed on the front line, are we supposed to cry in the rear? No. What we need now isn't despair, and it's not spreading rumors. We need to be stronger than ever. We must stand united. We must keep the home front safe, raise our children well, and keep the factory running. We need to show our men that with us behind them, they can fight without fear. I believe they'll come back. I believe it with all my heart." My words landed heavy like a hammer striking deep into each of their hearts. Slowly, the crying stopped, and faces lifted. In their eyes, I saw the flicker of hope reignite. "Emily's right," someone said. "We can't fall apart. Yes, we'll wait for them to come back." With renewed determination, everyone pulled themselves together. We turned our grief and fear into energy and focus. Production at the factory didn't just continue. It became even more efficient than before. We believed our strength was the best support we could give to the front line. But at night, when everything was quiet and I lay alone in our cold bed, fear crept in. "Jacob, where are you? Are you still alive? Please come back alive." Time ticked by, each minute an eternity. Just when we were on the brink of being swallowed by despair, a glimmer of hope finally appeared. A scout unit made up of veteran soldiers managed to break through enemy lines and locate the trapped vanguard unit. When the news reached us, the whole compound erupted in celebration. We cried tears of joy and held each other tight, overwhelmed with relief. The command center immediately organized a large-scale rescue mission. After a brutal battle, the vanguard unit was successfully extracted. They were coming home. Many were wounded, but they were alive. As the military trucks carrying the heroes slowly rolled into the compound, every wife and child poured out to the roadside. They held bouquets of flowers, waved flags, and welcomed their loved ones back with cheers and tears. I stood at the very front, eyes fixed on the convoy, scanning every window and every face, desperate to find him. Truck after truck passed. I didn't see him. My heart began to sink lower with every passing second. Finally, the last vehicle, a medical truck, stopped in front of me. The door opened. A few medics stepped out and carefully lowered a stretcher. Lying on it was a man wrapped in bandages from head to toe. Only his eyes were visible. Those eyes were staring straight at me. It was Jacob. I couldn't hold back anymore. My tears came rushing down as I threw myself toward the stretcher and grabbed his uninjured hand. His hand was cold but strong. "I'm home," he said, managing a faint smile. His voice was hoarse, barely audible. "Welcome home." I sobbed, completely overcome. Jacob's injuries were severe. While covering the unit's breakout, a piece of shrapnel had struck him in the back, just inches from his heart. If not for the timely rescue, he wouldn't have survived. In the days that followed, I stayed by his side in the hospital, never leaving him for a moment. I fed him, helped clean and dress his wounds. I had transformed from a pampered young lady into a devoted caregiver. His comrades often joked, "Commander, you didn't just marry a wife. You married an angel." Jacob would just smile without replying. But the way he looked at me, tender and full of unspoken love, said more than words ever could. Once his condition stabilized a bit, he introduced me to the hero who led the reconnaissance team during the battle. His name was Gao Chong, a man with tan skin and sharp, penetrating eyes. His left arm was in a cast from an injury he'd suffered in combat. He was the same soldier who had once been helped by Wei by his father. But unlike her, Gao Chong was upright and never got involved in her schemes. "Sis-in-law, we really owe you," he said earnestly. "If it hadn't been for the fried noodles you sent from the rear, we would have run out of food completely. Your care packages saved the whole unit." That was when I realized our seemingly small efforts had made a huge difference when it mattered most. Jacob told me that during their most desperate moments while surrounded, it was thoughts of us waiting back home that gave them the strength to keep fighting. "Emily," he said, holding my hand, "you and the other wives are our greatest heroes." After the war, accolades followed. Jacob was awarded first-class merit for his leadership and bravery, and was exceptionally promoted to Deputy Division Commander. Meanwhile, our Military Wives Mutual Aid Group was officially recognized by the Military District Headquarters for outstanding contributions on the home front. I was selected as a representative to attend the commendation ceremony in Beijing. At the Great Hall of the People, I met Jacob's legendary father, my father-in-law. He was a dignified yet kind man wearing a perfectly pressed military uniform with glinting stars on his shoulders. He patted my shoulder and said with pride, "Good girl. Our family is lucky to have a daughter-in-law like you." Returning from Beijing, a new chapter began in my life. Once Jacob had recovered and been discharged, we finally started living the peaceful and happy life we had longed for. One day, while I was at home making soup for him, Mrs. Lu Wang's wife came rushing over with a mysterious look on her face. "Emily, guess who I just saw in town?" "Who?" "Wei," she scoffed. "You wouldn't believe what she looks like now. She's scrubbing dishes in a tiny restaurant." After her brother-in-law was dismissed, her sister divorced her and moved back to her parents' house. No one's looking after her anymore. I listened calmly. I felt no pity, only a sense of closure. Closure. Those who are pitiful often have themselves to blame. Everything Wei suffered now, she had brought upon herself. The grudges of my past life had come to an unexpected but satisfying end in this one. I didn't pay attention to her fate anymore, because my life was now filled with people and things that truly mattered. Years passed in the blink of an eye. The breeze of reform and opening up swept across China, and our military wives' factory flourished. What started as a small workshop had grown into a full-fledged enterprise employing hundreds, with products sold across the country and even overseas. Many of the military wives had become well off, and their children received the best education possible. New buildings rose in our compound, and everyone moved into spacious, bright new homes. Jacob and I had a child, too, a lovable little boy. He was chubby and full of energy, with eyes and brows that looked just like his father's. From a young age, he loved following Jacob around, learning how to march in perfect step behind him. Chanting slogans, Jacob's career in the military also advanced smoothly. With his outstanding tactical skills and upright conduct, he climbed steadily step by step until he became the youngest commanding officer in the entire military district. As for me, I transformed from a naive, privileged girl into a respected entrepreneur, a model military wife, and a happy wife and mother. Everything felt so perfect. It was like living in a dream. That day was our wedding anniversary. Rarely free from social obligations, Jacob made it home early. He pulled out a bouquet of fiery red roses from behind his back and handed them to me. "Happy 10-year anniversary," he said, his eyes still burning with the same intensity they held when we first met. In those days, giving roses was already considered incredibly romantic. I smiled as I took the flowers, my heart as sweet as honey. "We're an old married couple now. Why all the romance?" "In my eyes," he said, his voice full of emotion, "you'll always be that girl who arrived at the compound wearing a red dress glowing like fire." After dinner, we put our son to bed and sat together on the balcony, leaning against each other as we looked up at the stars. "Emily," he asked softly, "do you ever regret it?" "Regret what?" "Marrying me, following me, going through so much hardship." I shook my head and rested it gently on his shoulder. "No regrets," I whispered. "In my past life, what I regretted most was realizing everything too late and missing out on 10 years with you. This life gave me a second chance. That's the greatest gift I could ever ask for." He looked at me in confusion, not understanding. I just smiled and said nothing. Some secrets were meant to stay secret. What mattered most was that we held tightly to our happiness in this lifetime. Looking into his eyes, I said, "Jacob, do you know something? You're not romantic at all." He froze, looking completely caught off guard, like a kid who'd done something wrong. I stood on tiptoe and gently kissed him on the lips. "But I love you," he smiled, a smile brighter than all the stars above us. He wrapped his arms around me tightly, as if trying to merge me into his very soul. "I love you too," he said. "I've loved you since the very first moment I saw you." Turns out it was never just one person chasing the other. It was always two hearts drawn across time and space, choosing each other with unwavering certainty. Outside, the lights of 1,000 homes sparkled in the peaceful night. I knew Jacob had played his part in creating that peace. And my own happiness was simply this: to stand by his side, care for our family, and grow old together in the calm flow of